Looks like a case of 2 from 5, the relegation battle in League Two. Of course, you could add a sixth in Gillingham to that equation, seeing as they remain winless under John Coleman. But the last couple of performances from the Gills, particularly the one against Walsall, where they came from behind to draw 1-1, gives me enough encouragement that Gillingham are going to limber over the line, as it were. But I think in terms of the 5 teams we're talking about this evening, Carlisle United, Morecambe, Accrington Stanley, Harrogate Town, and one other, Tranmere Rovers, of course. There you go. There's the 5. And I think Morecambe, of course, have been very competitive performance-wise this season. They've lost 12 games by 1 goal, and in lots of those games, they've been extremely competitive. I haven't quite found that killer edge, but can the likes of Callum Cook and Andy Dallas be the difference makers for the Shrimps in that final third? What about Carlisle United? A 0-0 draw with Colchester United last time out. Bit of a gap for the Cumbrians to sort of close down, but can Mark Hughes and use all of his higher level nous to steer them to safety? But what about Tranmere Rovers? Because as things stand, under the Palioses and under Nigel Adkins, they're only going in one direction. And it almost feels like surprising they're not in the relegation zone already. And they probably would be were it not for A, good form in August, and B, the struggles that I've mentioned with Morecambe and Carlisle. So Tranmere just about hanging on. But crucially, there could be a takeover in the pipeline, the high profile one at that, at Prenton Park, which could mean consequently that Nigel Adkins leaves and they have the opportunity for a new manager bounce, which, as we've discussed on recent podcasts, is long overdue. And there could be a more exciting future opening up in that corner of Birkenhead as well. What about Harrogate Town, though? They got a crucial 1-0 victory over Swindon last time out. James Belshaw essential to that victory. But Accrington Stanley losing 2-0 to Morecambe last Saturday means they're right back in the mire. So, plenty to discuss then on this League Two podcast. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. Before we start, you could do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify, because that would help us out for our numbers an awful lot. So if you enjoy what we do over here, you could do you'd be doing us a huge favour if you could help us out with that. We will be joined by our co-host Ed Walker, hopefully in due course. But for now, our other co-host Ben Jones of the Super White Army joins us this evening. Ben, how do you see things unfolding in terms of the League Two relegation dogfight? Obviously, as somebody who has skin in the game.
Yeah, a bit too tight, really. I would rather they weren't the way they were. It's not looking too good for us at the minute without change, but hopefully that change is coming very soon. As for the rest of it, I don't know. It seems really tough to call. Only a few weeks ago, we were saying that Newport were in a bit of trouble, and now they've kind of gone unbeaten in 6, picking up 14 points. So, I guess there's always the possibility that one of the current bottom sort of 5 or 6 could do the same and they pull away.
Would you call it a 5 or would you call it a 6, Ben?
It's very tough. I think it's probably a 5, even though Gillingham have got such a poor record at the moment. I was having a look at the outstanding fixtures for the rest of the season. They do seem to have kind of the easiest run in by quite a distance. And they've got kind of 1 or 2 games in hand on some teams. So, yeah, I think it would take something really monumental for Gillingham to go down where they are. Whereas kind of the sides below them, have tougher run-ins, less games, all those kind of things.
Yeah, I would have been worried about Gillingham after the no-show that they suffered in one of those games. Can't quite remember who it was, but then they went to Walsall the following Tuesday and got a point and played really well. And I think that response that John Coleman was able to get from his players, along with the sort of on-paper quality they've got, makes me think that they're just about going to keep their heads above water. Hoping to do likewise is Morecambe. So we're joined by Joel Shooter of the Shrimps Trust podcast. Good evening, Joel. Thanks so much for joining us. How do you assess Morecambe's survival chances after that. Well, after the 2-0 victory over rivals Accrington Stanley last Saturday, but also the 1-0 home loss to Doncaster.
Yeah, it's amazing how much your outlook and your mood can change in the space of a few days, isn't it? But I think we're still in with a chance. I've maintained that since January with the additions that you mentioned, Cook and Dallas and people. We're in with we're going to pick up points at a better rate and score goals at a better rate than we have done in the first half of the season. I'm pretty confident about that. But whether it's going to be quite at the required rate that we're going to need to get us out of trouble, and obviously that will be dependent on teams around us, but I'm not entirely sure. So I do feel it's quite up in the air at the moment. I'm happy that we've got a couple of wins recently, but I would say that we've had a pretty good record against teams around us in the table. I think by the time we played the rest of the bottom six at Christmas, I think we'd only lost to maybe Accrington and I think Newport were there around there at the time as well. So we'd had a really good record. We won lots of games. Obviously, we've drawn against Tranmere and beaten Tranmere.
Also, Joel, just on that, Newport, you should have beaten them. You could have easily beaten them both times.
Yeah,
because I saw you. Yeah, I saw you against them in August, and you're by far the better team. And you went to Rodney Parade a couple of weeks ago as well, lost 2-1, but had 27 shots. So you've certainly been competitive against the weaker sides in the league.
Exactly, yeah. It's just about being able to grind out a couple of wins against top half sides, and we really struggled to do that. I thought first half of the season that was by and large down to the fact that we had such little quality. So while we could kind of keep up, compete in the game and do all right and kind of compete tactically and everything, when it came to those fine moments when you just need to show a little bit of class in the couple of opportunities that you're going to get in the game, you need to show it. But we didn't have that at the time. We do more so now. I thought tactically we got it wrong against Doncaster last night. I thought we were a bit unfortunate against Notts County the other week. Missed a couple of big chances. But I think we just need to. It felt like we maybe went a little bit gung-ho with our lineup and were a bit too direct and ultimately became a bit too predictable and maybe just didn't consider the threat that Doncaster might pose maybe quite as well as we could have done. So, we'll have to see. I think that is going to be the key thing that's going to really make the difference. I think we can keep up on our form against, the bottom half, but then just nick a couple of wins against top half sides. That's probably going to be what will make the difference or not for us.
Ben, I think you went to the Mazuma on New Year's Day. What did you make of Morecambe that day?
They're pretty much what I expected. They stayed in the game, very hardworking and kind of maximizing what they had, I would say. They still kind of felt that they were lacking a bit of quality. They kind of got the goal and went ahead in that game, and then I think partly due to what was going on in the stands, it kind of just meant it was game over even at 1-0. With the way kind of on the day our fans got, rightly a bit annoyed, and I think you could just see the players somewhat give up to an extent in that game. But they did kind of what I expected under Adams. They stay in games. They are very good at set pieces and so on, and they created a few chances from set pieces and crosses from deep in that game. And I think that's kind of where they've had their success in recent weeks as well. They've kind of got from back to front quite quickly and created chances that way. And with the new strikers they've got, it seems to be working for them. And I guess when you play that way, kind of the standard of the opposition doesn't matter quite as much. So, they might pick up the odd result against teams at the top. The only thing that kind of surprised me, the Doncaster game, I don't think they actually had any chances after the red card. So 25 minutes to go, I would have kind of thought that they'd have really thrown the kitchen sink at that. But you can tell me if I'm wrong here, Joel, but I don't think he had a chance in that game after the red card.
To be honest, I'd argue that we barely had a chance all game, really. I think we had plenty of pressure, but I think you're right overall, though. We didn't after the red card, we simply didn't create anywhere near enough. And obviously, it's always worth adding in Doncaster. They've got a leader, they're defending the lead. At that point, they can really focus on just sticking everybody behind the ball and belting it away. But on the flip side, we didn't do what you needed to do. What we didn't try and stretch them. We didn't add a bit more width to our game. We didn't, we just kind of pelted it long on top of them, and they could just put men behind the ball, win the headers, snap on the second ball, and get it up the pitch. And I think there were something we could have made sooner. Maybe introduce Tollett to have a bit more width on the other flank as well. I think Adam Lewis probably should have been a bit of an essential person to come on after the red card, because I think when you're defending with that lead with 10 men, you're gonna compact, you're gonna get in the box, but you're gonna concede those spaces out wide and a little bit out the penalty area. And that's somewhere Adam Lewis loves to hit across from, and give him a bit of time to keep pinging in balls. It doesn't matter how many people you throw back behind the ball. I think there's a good chance that one of them is going to meet a target or just get spooned in by somebody. So I don't think we took the initiative well enough. I think we just stuck at trying to pile the pressure on with aerial balls, but that was just too predictable. And when you got 10 men, you don't want to be stretched about. And when you got 10 men and somebody just says, "No, we're just going to stick it within the width of the 18-yard box," it's just like,
the numerical advantage doesn't count for as much, does it?
Exactly.
That's really interesting. What was I going to say? Luke Hendry, Joel, because I think for Morecambe to have had a chance this season, you're probably going to need one or two players to perform, to play basically out of their skin and do much better than people were expecting, because the nature of the summer dictated that you were likely to get players that, maybe wouldn't have got AFL opportunities, in different circumstances. Luke Hendry is certainly in that category, but I know that I think it was Derek Quinn who mentioned in his interview with Derek Adams after the win over Accrington Stanley that Luke Hendry had played really well and seems to be coming in for a bit of praise at the moment.
Yeah, he took a couple of games to settle at the start of the season, but he's just turned into a really solid, consistent performer week in, week out. He deals with his man, he deals with his winger relatively well. He's super fit. I think when we've given him if we've ever switched to a back three and maybe given him a little bit of license to press a bit higher at the pitch, he tears up the pitch, he gets in people's faces, tries to kind of get forward and help support the winger. He's actually ended up notching in 4 assists, which is pretty handy for somebody who's not really known as a ball playing, crossing, getting forward right back. And I think he's done a really good job. He's just very steady, reliable, ain't going to do anything too stupid on the ball, gets a tackle in, works hard, sticks with his man. And you can generally rely on him to put in at least a 7 out of 10 performance most weeks.
Yes, that sounds a bit like Gary Miller, who Derek Adams had when he was at Plymouth Argyle, that kind of steady, reliable right back that can put a challenge in. Well done to Luke Hendry. Anyone else that you'd kind of pick out in terms of key players for Morecambe?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when we get it right and when we get the kind of balance at the side right, I think Callum Cook's had a really big impact. I think we simply haven't had a number 10 all season. I think that, number 10 attacking midfielder, kind of player who operates in those areas and does well in those areas. We just haven't had it. We've tried to mould Harvey McAdam there. It didn't really work out, and now he's actually playing deeper. He's doing a really good job, and we can kind of see that. Number 10 was never really his position. Callum Jones had a couple of games there, but don't really suit it. He's more of a deeper midfielder. Paul Lewis is, we've not really had anybody with that kind of creative guile kind of around the edge of the box who can, I think we would Cook. He wants the ball. He wants to get on the ball. He wants to take it in tight areas. He don't mind if there's, a couple of players snapping at his behind. He'll take it. He'll hold on to it. He'll wait for the pass. He'll try and get a bit of creativity, and that's something we've really missed. So it's good to have him. I think having Leon Gold coming back, that's really, really important. I think he's somebody who can bring a physical presence. He's actually got quite a lot of quality on the ball. Chips in with a few goals here and there. So I think it'll be good to have him back, obviously from a big injury layoff. And a couple of good forwards as well now and there with Dallas and Garner. Bit of guile, bit of running off the ball. slip into good areas. Both got, Dallas has got a real hammer ball over a shot on him. Jed Garner, technically, he's really quite proficient. So, yeah, there's quality in and around there. It's just making the most of it and just finding that balance so we can go up against some of the big boys in the league and nick a win or a couple of points here and there.
Do you feel like your home form's probably going to be where you need to improve a little bit if you're going to stay up? Because I think I was looking and you've got one of the kind of better away records of the teams at the bottom of the table, but your home form's lacking quite a bit. Do you feel like that's somewhere where if you can just maybe nick a couple extra wins, that'll be enough to get you over the line?
Yeah, I think home form will be pretty big. I think something like, before Saturday, it was 10 of our remaining 16 games were at home. It's now 8 of our remaining 14, but obviously it's still more than 50%. I think it's, what's funny with our home form versus our away form, dig into it a little bit further. When we played Carlisle, after we played Carlisle on Boxing Day, obviously halfway point of the season, we played all the other teams. I think we played all the other teams in the league, maybe by one, but we played all the bottom 6 by then. The rest of the other 5 teams in the bottom 6. We played them all away from home, and we've actually had a pretty good record against them. And I do kind of look back and I think, was our home and away record in the first half of the season particularly, was it skewed by the fact that we tend to play the stronger sides at home and the weaker sides away from home? I think that just, obviously, you never know how strong teams are going to be in pre-season, but just the way that things have fallen, I think that's probably a bit of a factor behind it. And obviously, since that kind of midpoint of the season, we've had Tranmere, Accrington at home. We've beaten them both. We've beaten Fleetwood at home, who aren't particularly, they've dropped off a bit since they had a fast start for the season. They're not an amazing side. So hopefully, the fact that we are playing generally slightly weaker teams at home for the remaining of the season is going to be a boost. On the flip side, it does mean that we've got a few quite tricky away fixtures coming up.
Yeah, I think I was when I was looking, your March looks quite difficult, but then maybe the April's a bit kinder for that run-in. You've got Carlisle and Harrogate at home, in your last few home games there. Harrogate at home, final game of the season's, probably quite a friendly fixture, final game of the season, but you don't really want it to go down to the last day if you can help it, because there's so many things that go into that with nerves and so on. But yeah, I think the general theme I got when I was looking at your fixtures was you've got a tricky March, but then quite a kind set of fixtures in April.
No, I think that's fair enough, and it's interesting. Harrogate, I'm sure we'll talk about more in a bit, but whether they're going to slip down, they do remind me of that. The Jesse Pinkman Breaking Bad quote, they can't keep getting away with it, but they just do seem to be able to keep getting away with it, despite the fact that they've actually, as far as I can make out, they've actually got a reasonably sized budget. They seem to insist on playing.
Well, Joel, they've had a reasonably sized budget in their first 3 years, that sort of lower mid-table kind of thing. But this year, I would say it definitely is the bottom 6.
Yeah,
budget.
I think they have cut back this year because they only brought, was it 4 players in during the summer or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think because the Leeds Cup tie or one or two things like that, it's sort of increased for January, so they've been able to bring in the likes of Bryn Morrison, Ben Fox, but I would definitely include Harrogate, even with the victory. The win over Swindon was huge. I think Belshaw and Jasper Moon and Anthony O'Connor, I think that 3, Belshaw being the goalkeeper and Moon and O'Connor at centre half, I think that'd be really important for them.
O'Connor's a great centre half at this level. He did well for us in League One, so I think having a couple of key players in that is important. And there's part of me, obviously, I want to bring as many teams into the relegation fight as possible and have more teams that might potentially fall off a cliff and overtake. On the flip side, if Harrogate end up coasting it to the end of the season, they're 10 points clear on the final day.
Yeah, I think it could go either way with them. In terms of their fixtures, they've still got to play the whole bottom 6. So, that can kind of go either way for them. You win those games and they're going to be very comfortable come that final day. But at the flip side, there's 6-pointers, tight games. They can go either way, can't they? So really tough to call with Harrogate. But they just don't seem to have pulled away from the bottom few at any point this season, even with the kind of, the terrible form that sort of Tranmere and Carlisle have had over the past 6 or 7 weeks in particular. So I don't know. I think it's quite likely it will go into that final day with at least 3 or 4 sides still playing for that bottom 2 spot.
Yeah, it could be one that goes right to the wire. We'll bring in our other co-host, Ed Walker. Ed,
sorry.
Don't worry.
Sorry, I'm late. Sorry. I've missed everything. I'm worried I'm going to start repeating people now, but we'll go with it nonetheless.
That's okay. What do you make of Morecambe and their survival chances? Because they did obviously get that huge win last weekend, beating Accrington Stanley 2-0. Obviously went down 1-0 to Doncaster in midweek.
Yeah, Morecambe seem to either win or lose, apart from when they play Tranmere. That's what I'm noticing going back through all the games at the moment. I think as you want to say, I desperately don't want to copy what Joel's just said now and say all the things he's going to say. So I'm trying not to do that, but I can't make any guarantees. It's very fair that if we're looking out on which one of the bottom 2 do we believe can pull out of it, it is that feeling of Morecambe. He's experimented a bit more with the forward areas than I thought he was going to. I kind of had this idea that Ben Tollett was the guy in the forward areas, and I'm not so sure on that now because we've seen some impacts from Dallas, from Cook coming in, from Guion Edwards kind of revitalising himself, having that flexibility. I thought Dackers was kind of the main striker. Now I'm wondering if there is a spot for Garner near. Is Angold's the right guy? Is there a chance maybe Hope or Dallas takes that spot? It's kind of nice to feel like there's some more decent forward options now because it's felt like for the first half of the year they kind of had to just put up with a few numbers and hope that a couple come good to level Tollett had.
Yeah, pretty much. I think with Tollett had a real purple patch around November kind of time, and to be honest, if that's when our form picked up, and I think he was a big contributor to that. I think last month or so, it's maybe not quite worked out for him as well as it did in November. So obviously he's come out the side now. We've got some other reinforcements. I do feel as well with just because of how limited our forward options, that there was so much pressure on him to pull rabbits out the hat. With Graham was injured for such a long time, and Gold's been out for a lot of the season as well. So he's become more of a kind of bench option now at the moment. I think in terms of who our main striker is going forward, like you said, I think there's been a bit of experimentation with Derek, with what he's done in the past few weeks. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. I think we shocked Fleetwood by just having 3 centre forwards, sticking it long and bullying them essentially in it, and it worked against Fleetwood. They were flapping. Sean Rooney was kicking at air. It caused a lot of chaos and worked out well. And Timothy did the same against Newport. They struggled to deal with it, and we just got really unlucky that day. But then we've come against Doncaster. We've tried the same thing. Better team, bit more momentum now when they had the early goal as well, and they were pretty comfortable defending against it. So I think we just do need to be careful we modify approach. We don't lose too much balance, because I think, especially as well, when you've got 3 centre forwards and they're all kind of not, but you sacrifice having wingers or more attacking midfielders or more structure behind them. So what you end up with is your centre forwards kind of having to drop deep, having to drop wide, defend a bit more than you'd ideally like them to have to, and that takes them away from the areas that you want them to be most effective in. So I think that was a bit of an issue last night with Dallas and Garner. They weren't really doing much business in and around the boxes as he'd like them to. So I think we're just going to have to make tough decisions on the day about who's starting and who's playing where, who's going to come off the bench, and go from there. Just make sure we just have that little bit of balance so we don't get a bit too top heavy and a bit predictable.
Has McAdam had a mention yet for this episode?
No,
because I'm curious on that, Joel, actually, because I feel like every time I talk Morecambe, I talk McAdam, because I do quite fancy him as a player. I think he's quite good. And I'm curious about that midfield dynamic now, because I think we've seen recently it's been Lewis and McAdam for the last 2 as a kind of pair, with Cook a bit further forwards. And I kind of wonder if that works in your eyes, because in kind of my head, I kind of see McAdam and Cook as a bit similar players who kind of want the same role in the team, really.
I think Cook's shown that Cook's a proper number 10. He wants to get
Cook's
the ball.
Got more delicate touch, I think. I think McAdam's more knocked the ball ahead of him and sort of ran onto it. Whereas I think Cook is one of those who can manipulate the ball in tight areas, personally.
No, I think that's pretty much spot on with it as an observation. I think we were trying to mould Harvey into a number 10 this season, and it hasn't really worked, to be honest. I don't think he's, like Gab said, he's not quite got the quite got that little level of guile and real ballsiness in the ball in those tight little nasty little areas. But we've played him a bit deeper last few games, kind of with a 6-8, kind of going box to box. And he's dead fit. He gets around the pitch really well, side back to front. He links up play. He seems a lot happier coming to try and get the ball in slightly deeper areas. Can play a forward pass, get stuck in the tackle. So I think he's done really, really well there. I think it's maybe about who we have partner him. Paul Lewis came in the other week. It was a bit of a surprise against Notts County. He did all right for a couple of games against County and Accrington, but maybe long term, I want somebody with a bit more energy and a bit more dynamism in the midfield to go next to McAdam. I think maybe Tom might be worth another shot back in. But yeah, I think he's good at. You don't lose out too much defensively with McAdam. He's a hard worker and he's pretty switched on.
Reckon you'll stay up then, Joel?
I don't know. Hopefully, hopefully. Like I said, I think we'll pick up more points than we have done, but we'll have to see if it's quite enough, dependent on what teams do around us, really.
Well, we wish you well. Joel, are you able to stay for the remainder of the podcast, or have you got to shoot off?
No, I'm actually able to stay for the rest. So
lovely, perfect, bonus. Well, I wanted to ask you, Ed, what I asked Ben earlier, which is, do you consider this a case of 2 from 5 in terms of the relegation dogfight, or would you put Gillingham in the mix as well?
I can't believe we're actually considering it, but I find it's absurd that Gillingham have had the season they've had.
Yeah,
there's something to be said for how badly that's going for Gillingham at the minute. My instinct should be no with Gillingham, but there's something.
But the performance against Walsall,
it's so dodgy. It can be when the low points are bad. They're low.
They haven't. Yeah, I've just having a look at their form. They haven't won since mid-December.
It's really. It seems really ill-fitting at the minute, and that does make me quite anxious on them with the way they are. I kind of sit 5.5 in a minute because I don't know if I really consider Gills in that or not. I don't know where I really sit on Gills at the minute, whether I'm just accepting they just had a bad season or whether I think they could have a truly awful one. I don't know. You wonder how far the gap is before people start looking. When do you go into looking over the shoulder stage with these teams, don't you? I suppose Gillingham are at that stage now for a lot of their fans.
Yeah, I can understand that. I would probably say, because the performance at Barrow, I think John Coleman described as one of the worst he'd ever, seen in his entire managerial career of 25 odd years. But the fact that they responded well with that performance at Walsall just makes me think that he's going to get enough out. But I can understand why you would put Gills in the equation too. Well, let's bring in our next guest, which is Lee Rooney from the Brunton Bugle. Lee, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about Carlisle United. What have you made of Mark Hughes' initial impact at Brunton Park?
Yeah, so far, not too bad, to be honest. I mean, look, he's picking up a situation that was an absolute mess, and in terms of the planning and things like that, to sign 11, 12 players in January and then sack the manager the last day of the window is madness, really. And I've said it before, he should have been. There's probably 3 occasions we could have sacked him before that we should have sacked him, but it is what it is. It's happened. It's weird because I think most of our fans, when John Brady's name was mentioned, were all quite excited, like, oh, you know what, he's someone at our level who could do quite well. He knows the level, he's got results at this level. When Hughes' name was mentioned, it was quite split, and there was quite a lot who were for it. And I think I've said this on our pod that with the context of the whole fake rivalry that seems to be built up online between ourselves and Bradford, I think that's clouded some of our fans' judgment a little bit on it, in that they're sort of thinking, oh, because he's managed. If he'd never managed Bradford and he'd come straight into manage us, you'd be like, wow, what an appointment, unbelievable. As it is, he's picking up a bit of a mess. To be fair, he is known for the fact that his teams like to play better football, which is essentially what the owners want and what we've built a squad to do mostly. But what I'd say about him is he's much more prepared to tweak and change things and be pragmatic rather than dogmatic, which we all know that Williamson was. He just would not budge from that 3-4-2-1. He just wouldn't. Hughes, half time at the weekend against Colchester, realised we weren't getting into the game. He'd already tweaked it a little bit in the first half from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3, and then went bang, I'm going to go free at the back. And we got control of the game. And it was just refreshing to actually see for the first time in about 4 or 5 months a manager who knew how to make changes and get a team back into the game. So it's a slow start, but look, he's had barely any time to work with them in terms of training. This is the first time he's had a full week to work with them. And with players come back from injury, look, I still think we're in deep trouble. I still think it's going to take a hell of an effort to get ourselves away. But I feel a little bit more encouraged.
Lee, do you think there is any possibility they went for Hughes knowing what's likely to happen? Or do you think they've gone and got Hughes in with this idea, we're still going to get out of this? Do you think there's any thought in Piatek's minds about the idea of being National League next year?
I think they're realistic and know there's a chance. What I'd say is Hughes applied for the job. It wasn't a case of going out and trying to get him. He himself apparently applied for the job. So that shows fair play to him, because he could easily go and put his feet up and retire effectively and do punditry. He's earned enough. But he wants to be coaching, he wants to be managing, and he's... I do wonder if there's one eye, because look, he's done a rolling contract, which is what Williamson was on, which is an interesting way of doing it. It seems to be the way that the Piateks want to work, that managers come in on rolling deals where I'm sure they'll get a decent payout if they're sacked, but
is that a lack of
them.
Why do you think, is that more financial, or is it just lack of trust, or is it just the habit they have? Because rolling contract to me kind of suggests we're not certain you're the right guy to take us forward, perhaps.
Maybe not, but like I said, Williamson had exactly the same deal. He had a rolling contract, and we paid money to get him out of his deal at MK. So I do wonder with that, it's just a case of that's just the way they want to work going forward with managers, and he seems quite comfortable with it, and it's one of those ones. Maybe for the next 2 or 3 months is a bit disastrous and doesn't go well, he can walk away and say, well, it didn't work for me. It's not really my fault. If it works, we can maybe look, and he might say, well, actually, let's make this more permanent or something. I don't know. I think the flexibility of it works quite well for both parties, so it's not too much of a problem at the moment.
I mean, Ben, as a Tranmere Rovers fan, you've kind of had a tough experience with a manager that was a very well-respected Premier League manager just over 10 years ago, and maybe doesn't have the same sort of clout now. I suppose in Nigel Adkins. I mean, is that a valid comparison, or do you think Mark Hughes should be treated on a different, a different trajectory, perhaps?
There's some similarities, but I think it would be fair to say with Adkins, when he got the job permanently, we did have a bit of a bounce at that point. And that kind of dragged us away from being bottom to comfortable mid-table last season. So it's possible that the same happens here with Carlisle, where they get a bit of a new manager bounce. Obviously he's going to be a well-respected guy with the career he's had both as a player and manager. So with it being a different voice, sometimes that on top of the respect, as I say, might be enough. Just the different message with the players, motivate them a bit more, and it might be enough. It's hard to say. Longer term, I don't think it's a great appointment, but in the short term, I could see the logic and how it could work.
You're always kind of worried, Mark Hughes, I think, is that when people talk about him as a manager, you inevitably see the clip of that training video he did wherever he was, where he hits that volley in the corner. That's what people go. People go on to look at Mark Hughes and go, "Oh, he's probably the best player in the team already, and he's still 50 or whatever it is." That people don't talk about his achievements, and I kind of see your point, Gab, with the high reputation managers of the two. It's a bit different, isn't it? Didn't Adkins kind of ascend up to Premier League level?
Yes,
then
that's
come
true,
down.
yeah.
Whereas I think Hughes started at the very top, didn't he?
Sure, yeah.
He's had that decline in his
Hughes had
reputation.
more longevity at the top level, whereas Adkins basically had a season, like a third of a season with Southampton before they sacked him for Pochettino.
Well, the thing with Hughes as well is, if you look at his record at the top flight, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's not like, yeah. Someone saying, he hasn't won anything, but that's the case with so many managers at the top level. You got Stoke playing decent football to finish in the top 9 3 seasons in a row. And I'm pretty sure Stoke fans would absolutely be delighted with that now if they had the chance. So, he's clearly a decent manager. Like I said, whether it'll actually work out long term, I don't know. I really, really don't. But I think I can see the logic behind it.
Talking about a team lead, does that midfield miss Callum Guy?
Yes, and thankfully he played in a training game this week.
Good.
So he played 60 minutes in a training game.
Good.
I mean, that is for me, one of the biggest downfalls that, excuse me, Williamson had. Was we had a really good November, if you remember back. Well, a good November, so really good, overstating it. But, he was nominated for Manager of the Month in November. And we got draws against Doncaster and Crewe. And then we were supposed to play Newport, and the game was called off due to one of the storms. And he had 2 weeks to work with the team. And promptly dropped Callum Guy for the next game. And his reasoning after the game was like, I want to keep him sharp for the Christmas games. He's only just come back from a long-term injury. Only for Guy to get that illness anyway. And we lost 2-0 against Chesterfield, and we were dreadful that day without Guy in the midfield, and really shot himself in the foot in terms of overthinking. So getting him back in, and it's going to be nice to see him play alongside Callum Whelan, because Callum Whelan, of the signings we made, he looks like he's capable of playing this level quite comfortably, actually. I've been really impressed with him. So I think the fans are hoping. He probably won't start at the weekend against Gillingham, but we're hopeful that maybe if we can get half an hour out of him, and maybe in the Barrow game after that, get him up to speed and have him there for the rest of the season.
Joe Hugill then, Lee, any sign of him sort of catching fire in terms of goals? Because that's something you've missed up top this season, isn't it?
Yeah, the weekend against Colchester, I think he might have been one of the players who had the bug that was going around the squad, because he wasn't that involved in the first half. He still had a couple of chances. I've been quite impressed with him. He's a really hard worker. Armstrong was quite like that, but Armstrong never really made the right runs into the right areas at times, whereas with Hugill, he's actually making those runs and he's getting the chances. And
he's quicker than Armstrong as well.
Sharp off the line, good off the last man, I find. If you sit him on the last man and feed him in behind, you've got an asset there.
Yeah. And he's pretty good with both feet as well, actually. That's something I noticed as well. He doesn't seem to be worried about hitting it with his left or his right. And, he was lucky not to score against Notts County. And if he scores in that game, you never know what happens, because we had them on the ropes for the start of the second half in that match. Look, it's weird because people forget the only goal he scored for so far was in the 5-1 defeat against Swindon. So it's kind of completely forgotten, but he was a great finish from the edge of the area, and he has been a bit unlucky with other chances. And
I think he's had an unlucky professional career up to now, because he was with myself last year, Lee, and we were a dreadful team, just never played to his strengths at all. And then at Wigan, I think he was kind of second field to Dale Taylor a lot of times, still got himself a few goals. So there's definitely say with the striker situation out at Carlisle, there's that chance to be the main guy in this team. Yeah,
because the other options in there at the moment, you've got Matt Dennis, who we've signed, who MK Don's released, and I think he touched the ball 6 times in the second half against Colchester. I'm not sold on him at all so far. Joe Bevan, who was playing against Gretna last season for Albion Rovers, so it's a big step up, for coming on loan from Burnley. Kenwyne Scott, though, is an interesting one, because obviously he had a spell with us previously, very briefly. Signed from Notts County. He's only scored 1 goal since coming back, but every time I've seen him play, he really impresses me. He's a smart player. He knows how to win free kicks. He's played more as a number 10 actually under Williamson, and he's not really had much of a chance under Hughes yet. He didn't come off the bench at the weekend. I think again he might be one of the ones with a bug, but I quite like the look of him as well. So we've got options, but goals is 100% a big problem for us. We do need people to start chipping in with goals quickly.
Well, one player who has been doing that a little bit surprisingly, Lee, has been Sam Lavelle. I know Joel would probably have some good things to say about him from his time at Morecambe. Hasn't quite built on that positive stint in the way that he would have hoped, or the way I imagined he would in terms of rising up the league. So I think injuries have sort of played a part in that. Any sign of him sort of enduring some kind of resurgence?
Sam Lavelle's 28. That's caught up on me.
Yeah,
he's still 22 in my head. Good grief.
Why do you have to say that?
Sorry, John. I've just seen it here. I've just noticed.
Yeah, you know what? He's. It's funny enough. 442 sent me an email the other day saying, can you give us your top 5 players in League Two for this season, and also the best player for your club? And I was like, bloody hell, it's slim pickings, isn't it? And Lavelle stood out. It was Lavelle or Breeze, basically, straight away. One of those two. We're going to get it. And then Lavelle's done well in a rubbish team. That's the best way to put it. He's been better than he was last season, and he is pretty much he's looked like our only threat on set pieces, which is frustrating when you've got a team with your likes of Thomas and Hayden in the back line as well. Hayden's been a big disappointment, sadly. He just hasn't really got back to the form he had when he was at Wrexham.
It's those injuries, isn't it?
Yeah, with him. So So yeah, no, Sam's done. He's our captain now because obviously Charlie White's still out till I think the end of March. So I'm hoping he's going to be back now, so we might get to see him before the end of the season, which is a real positive. But yeah, no, he adapted well to Williamson's style of football as well. I think the first thing we thought when Williamson come in, we thought, well, he's not going to be able to do. He's a head and kick it sort of defender, but actually playing in the middle of a back three, he was really comfortable and probably our best performer under Williamson as well. So yeah, he's done perfectly fine. It's just the ones around him haven't really done it. That's
I'd like to hear a little bit on young Charlie MacArthur who's coming.
You know what? He's got good ability on the ball. And I'm impressed with his ability on the ball. He seems to be able to pick up a pass. He dilly-dallies on it a little bit too much. The telling stat is he's played, I think, 6 games for us. Or was it 6 or 7? I think it's 6 or 7 games for us.
He started playing straight away, didn't they?
Yeah, essentially. I'm checking the stats here on this one because I want to make sure I get this right. So since he's come in, he has played 7 games for us and he's been booked 4 times. So that's where there's an issue with him, really, that he gives away silly bookings quite often. In fact, he got booked twice for Newcastle in the trophy as well this season in 3 games. So he's got 6 bookings, I think, in not 10 appearances this season. So that's something he would have to cut out of his game. There's clearly a good player in there. He's been playing left back the last few games, and he got hooked at half time against Colchester. He was ill, but even if allowing for him being ill, he didn't have a great half, to be honest. And Cameron Harper actually came on and played quite well. So there's a chance that Harper might actually be able to revive his career finally with us because it's been a stop-start one for him.
Harper's another one I actually want to touch on because I'm a bit confused with him. Because I was looking at the team list, particularly under Williamson, and to a certain degree at the start under Hughes. Surely Harper is the logical pick for left wing back, and he was never getting picked there. And you were thinking, I think I saw him sometimes in midfield. Just never felt like he was being put out left.
I kind of feel a bit for him. You know, at the start of his career with us, he was injured at the start of the season, so we signed Ben Williams to fill in for a few games. When he finally got fit, because Williams managed to get injured, he got into the team, and he looked okay left back, you know, and he got a really good corner on him, you know, whipping some really good balls in. And then when Williamson came in, I think he was that desperate for a ball-playing sitting midfielder in there. He just took one look at Harper and thought, well, he's left-footed, he can play on the ball a bit. I'll put him in there. And he did okay alongside Guy for a bit. But then he started to... There's what I think it was against Tranmere in particular. He played at left wing back in that game. And he got completely done by Norman for the goal. Like, he just didn't do his defensive duties at all in it. And lost his place in the team from there pretty much. And I don't think featured since really until now. And there's clearly a very good player in there. He just hasn't really settled in that much. And I don't think it's entirely his fault. Like you say, he's been moved about so much in the team. He's been asked to play on the right quite a lot. He played on the right at Walsall away. And oh, God, he had an absolute nightmare that night. Whereas, you know, he actually played on the right against Colchester and did okay the other day. So I don't know. I think he'll probably play at left wing back at the weekend or left back, one of the two. I think Hughes will probably bring him in.
Let's hope that's the case. So, big picture then, Lee. How are you feeling about your survival chances?
I think this is a massive week coming up for us. So, Saturday is Gillingham. Looking at their form, that's as good a chance we've got for a win in a long time. I think we played pretty well against Colchester for long periods. I think Colchester are a better team than Gillingham, so I'll take the positives from that.
Something to build on.
And I think as well, if we beat Gillingham, I've listened to a little bit of you guys before I came on, and I do genuinely think if we beat them, suddenly,
if you beat Gillingham, I'll hit the panic buttons with them. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, definitely. They'll suddenly be like, oh, hang on, we still haven't won under John Coleman. We've just been beaten by the bottom side. They've then got Fleetwood in midweek at home, who Fleetwood are doing fairly well, and then Morecambe. And Morecambe, if Morecambe beat them, suddenly, bang, they are right in it. Yeah. So we've got that, and then we've got a massive game on the Thursday night at Barrow. You know, thank you very much, Sky, for moving that to a Thursday night. And yeah, that's a huge one for us. You know, we've got to beat them. You know, I'm tempted fate, but they haven't beaten us since they got into the league. So I'm kind of hoping that we can keep that run going. And if we can, it's asking a lot, but if we could even get 4 points from the next 2 games, I'd suddenly start to have a little bit of belief. But if we don't win either of them, I'd be worried that it's too big a task to pull back from.
Yeah, certainly a big gap. Well, listen, Lee, thanks so much for joining us from the Bradton Bugle, and look forward to speaking to you again later in the season.
No problem. Cheers, Gab.
Top man. Ben, I wanted to talk to you about Tranmere, because I suppose the big news is to come, really, in terms of the mooted takeover. Indications are that it could be just around the corner.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very close. The final paperwork, I believe, is being submitted any day now. So kind of once that happens, I think we can expect Adkins to go day one.
Yeah, agreed.
Of that change, and that's the real big thing, because I've maintained all season. I think we've got a mid-table squad that's been mismanaged, doesn't have clear direction from the manager. We haven't played the same team twice. Sorry, we've only played the same team twice, once all season. Every other week we've changed side, week into week. That kind of complete lack of continuity goes against everything I said pre-season about the sides that had good continuity were going to do well this year. We've changed formations on top of that, so individual players don't know their role. More recently, we've had Amari Patrick and Sol Solomon, a winger and a striker at wingback, which in a side that was dominating games maybe is okay, but not in a side that's conceding goals and struggling to score them. So I think the players have just stopped listening to the manager, and that's most kind of evidenced by our disciplinary record away from home. We've had, I think it's 5 red cards in the last 7 away games. And Adkins came out the other week after, I think it was the Swindon game, and said something like, the players have been told they need to really focus on their discipline and so on. Well, I think that's just really highlights that they're just not listening to him anymore, and that's been the case all season. So
and you do have to apply some individual accountability to the players as well. Not without taking anything away from the blame attached to Adkins. I think the players have got to sort of, whatever you think about the manager, the players have got to get together and think, say, as a matter of professional pride, what we're delivering when we cross the white line hasn't been good enough.
Yeah, I think that's fair to a point. But I think there's a lot of mental things that go into football, and when you're essentially battling against your own manager, I think that can really wear players down.
Yeah.
I think if you're a creative midfielder or a player who creates chances, and then you see Harvey Saunders missing from 6 yards every week, it's kind of, what do you do? I mean, there was last 3 games, he's had 3 chances that without question all should have been goals. He didn't really make the keeper work. One of them went straight to the keeper like it was a defender heading it back to him. So you've got that. You've got the way he's completely ostracized Josh Hawkes the past 2 seasons, despite the fact that over a Tranmere career that's over 100 games, he averages a goal 1 in 3 games. And you've got a side that struggles to score. For me, he would be one of the first names on the team sheet. You've got Amari Patrick, you've got Josh Hawkes, and I think that's where you should be trying to focusing. How do you get those wingers into positions to score goals? I think that will be helped now by Luke Norris as returned from injury. He's had a very stop-start Tranmere career the past 2 years. Obviously he did well before that with Stevenage. There was good signs at the weekend against MK Dons for 20 minutes. He scored a penalty. He had a flick on that, again, Saunders should have done better with. He didn't get anywhere near it, but it was a good flick on in the 6-yard box. Something we haven't really had a centre forward able to do all season. So I think there's positive signs there. But I think, as we discussed a few weeks back, whenever it was, for me, if we don't change manager, it's likely we will go down. I think if we change manager in the next few weeks, so we've got, 8 or 10 games with a new manager, the takeover going on and the positivity that create, I think you'll see, with the way our fan base is and the way we can kind of carry the team through certain games and situations, the last 6 away games we have could be massive with the fan base. We'd likely sell all those away ends out, and might pick up a few points there that we otherwise wouldn't have expected. But aside from all that, the really big thing for me is we play Accrington Stanley on Tuesday at home. I think that's about a must-win as you can get. If you win that game, I think it's a real springboard for potentially going on a little mini run. If you
I think the
lose it,
takeover will have happened by then.
it won't have happened, I don't think, from what I understand. But I think if you can win that game and then the takeover's a week or two after that, you're building up a bit of positive momentum there for both the players and the fans. As I say, maybe a new manager for 8 to 10 games at the end of the season. And it's it sounds like if there's the possibility of that happening, there's going to be a lot of money coming into the club over the next month. So it's not going to be kind of a panic manager. It'll be someone they've had lined up for some time now with quite a high profile. Probably from League One or the Championship, from what I'm gathering. So it's someone who could immediately essentially do what we need to do, which is back to basics and create chances to score goals. And I think if that can happen, I'm not confident we'll stay up, but I think we've got a reasonable chance. So I think it's really tough to kind of call with us because it really does depend so much on that managerial situation.
I just want a manager who can pick a strike force and stick with it. So
annoying
the chopping and changing.
It's been like that right through his tenure, though. Even when it was kind of going okayish for him last season, Kieran Morris, even though he scored 10, 11 goals, was in and out of the side last year. The only person who was really guaranteed a spot besides Rob Apter last year was Connor Jennings. But the thing we saw last season with him, and we've seen it again now, he's in his early to mid 30s. He got burnt out and then kind of isn't as good as what his main attribute is, which is kind of his pressing from the front. And we saw that at the tail end of last year where he burned out, and I think we've seen it in recent weeks. So he's had a little bit of a rest now the past couple of weeks, so hopefully he can come back and really galvanise us. He probably should be the captain for the run-in of the season. I don't think Tom Davis has been a good captain for us for a number of reasons.
Yeah. Well, do you know what, Ben? The best defenders, I think, are the ones where it's like you don't really notice them. Like I remember watching John Mazzino play for Burton in the title-winning season in League Two, and he was very like there was a subtlety to it where he would just consistently win his headers and just always be there, but without sort of exerting loads of effort or running around loads or flying into it. Whereas I look at Tom Davis and I don't see that sort of presence. I see chaos, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think when he's kind of followed on from two blokes who have been amongst the best at it in kind of League Two, in kind of Peter Clark and Steve McNulty. In terms of reading the game, he's kind of followed on from them, and that's kind of the standard in terms of being able to read the game, because with both of them, it completely covered for a lack of mobility. But no, he charges out of position too much. He doesn't seem to know how to move it. But I think it could go on for a while there. But I think the next few weeks are really big for us. That Accrington game, we still have to play them twice, actually.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Accrington Stanley, Ben, because we do have to wrap up in the next few minutes.
Yeah,
I did want to ask Joel what you thought of Accrington Stanley.
You're going to ask Joel about Accrington? Okay, this will be fun. Just sit back and enjoy this.
To be fair, I thought, what, they played all right against us. I thought they were probably a bit unfortunate in the first half. I mentioned it before, but the way that we have covered midfield in the last few games hasn't been ideal, and they took advantage of it. Sean Whalley keeps pulling out the bag.
Yeah, he defies age because he does look very fit for his age, doesn't he, Joel?
He's in great shape, and I think we did well to keep him quite quiet. The big lad, Bolton up front, big lad, good, good touch, caused a lot of trouble, but not very clinical. And I think ultimately that could be the thing that maybe drags them down to the mire. I thought they were pretty lively and did okay, but without, obviously, they were missing Rawson against us, and they've I can't remember his name, the big lad they had on loan in the first half of the season. He's gone back. I think it's to Arsenal. I think it is, and they do feel they felt pretty floppy at the back. We didn't do a great deal, but they gave us a couple. Well, especially the first one, a really soft goal, and it felt like that was one of the probably the first time this season that we won a game, and I thought that's basically just because we bullied them with our better players. I think they've picked up a lot from non-league over the course of the season and last summer. You can see it in the energy and the carrying out the game plans relatively well. They look half decent, but that bit of quality to kind of keep the heads at the back and to maybe be a bit more clinical with their chances and create a bit more in the final third. Maybe that's probably going to be their falling down, but whether they've got enough in terms of points on the board and enough in the tank to see them out for the rest of the season, who knows?
What do you think of Accrington Stanley, Ed?
Don't particularly like them that much, truthfully. I just don't really have a buzz out of them. Feels like there's such a dependence on Sean Wally, 37-year-old Sean Wally.
Yeah,
grabbing the moments, just putting the faith in that. It's I don't know. I thought a front pair that I don't really think some of these are actual strikers they're playing up there. I thought Tyler Walton was a winger at Southport.
Yeah, I thought he was a left winger. Yeah,
converted to a striker. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
He's bloody massive, to be fair. He's good. He's good in the air, good touch. But I know what you mean. That could make sense because I thought he had a couple of good chances, but he just.
I think they started a wing back at the beginning of the season. He slowly got further upfield. So
really, it's
intriguing.
Yeah.
With that.
I thought he did okay overall, but
I just quite like Josh Woods. I'm kind of keen on that. I think there could be some interesting growth there. It's aside from that though, that it's just there's very little that blows me away with this team. It's Wally who's the standout, and the guy's touching 40 in the coming years. It's just, it's the Accrington way, isn't it? Their whole thing, the successful period to them has been finding guys out non-league that are gems, developing them, selling them on, but making use of them in that time. And I guess the last few years, they just haven't hit to those levels we've aspired them to be. And I think the hope was that Kelsey Mooney and Jimmy Knowles were going to be that. Not really happened. I think Mooney's had a bit of injury problems. Knowles has gone back out on loan. So that's not hit to level with them. What do they do with Charlie Caton? We'll have to wait and see with that. What do they find with the lad who's come in? Devon Matthews is coming from Chester. What do we see with that? These guys kind of need to start hitting at levels because they're going to run out. There's going to become a time where I think if they somehow pull this off and survive this year, there's not much to really believe they are. So they're going to transform the season next year with the way the squad currently looks.
Do you think, as I say, it's a big game for us Tuesday, but I think it's massive for them as well because looking at the way the fixtures have lined up, they've got, I think it's Doncaster this weekend, and then they play us. You've got Morecambe with 2 home games in the same time frame. So it's possible that Accrington find themselves in the bottom 2 on Tuesday evening. Do you think if they do drop into that there, that's kind of a lot of negative momentum for them and quite hard to turn that around?
It's an interesting one, Ben, because I've felt like there's been a few just above the relegation zone, yourselves include Accrington, to a certain degree, Harrogate at times, who have all felt like utterly, actually in probably worse morale than the teams actually in the bottom 2. The problem is the bottom 2 was a gap below and having to keep trying to build. And Morecambe are on the cusp now of doing that. Admittedly, Tuesday night, I think, was a bit of a missed opportunity. It feels like Joel against, I know it's a top Doncaster side, but that was a chance to actually properly get out of there for the first time. And that bottom 2 has been the way it is for quite a while now. And it's I feel like this season's kind of put forward the argument for 3 up, 3 down from the National League because really the bad team is going to finish 22nd and get away with it.
I don't think Tranmere is slightly different because the takeover comes through and the money and they'll be a completely different proposition if they stay up. But I don't think League 2 would miss Accrington Stanley or Harrogate if they went down. Not like, I don't mean that disrespectfully because I love fans of both.
I know what you mean, Gab. It's always the case with League 2 because you've got 2-team relegation zone. You can be dreadful and get away with it.
Yeah,
you can just because there's 2 really. And what it's not normally the case this year, but you normally find the League 2 relegation zone is taking up a basket case. They're just an absolute state and just in free fall because their ownership's done terrible things to them, and it's not
I think to an extent that's probably us this year. We're probably the closest to that, kind of an ownership at the end of their
Joel might have something to say about that.
I think I can raise you there actually. The stuff about obviously the Tranmere takeover. I mean, it shines a light on how ridiculous our situation is. The fact that they've had interest, Tranmere. It's been held up obviously with various going-ons over in the States, which have well, apparently now been, well, as it seems now, has been resolved. And now it looks like the takeover is going to be complete imminently. So for that all that to happen for Tranmere, and over that whole timescale, we've still been faffing around. Jason, our owner, has just been faffing around, leading us down, ridiculous paths with people who, as well, on current evidence, can't actually pass the EFL test. It's it's very frustrating.
100%, Joel. We are pushed for time, so we have to wrap this up in the next minute. So just a word, 2 words from, or 3 words, depending on the number of words in the team name. Relegation. I'm going to start with you, Ben. Give me two club names to go down from League Two.
I don't think I can give you 2. I think I can say similar to what did the other week, which I think it will be Carlisle plus ourselves or Accrington, depending on what happens the next fortnight.
Okay, so you think Morecambe with Derek Adams stays? Because I think Derek Adams, the one manager, in the bottom 5 teams that you would take over anyone else. So that's a big advantage Morecambe have. Joel, who are you going to say?
Oh, Ben, you've convinced me with some of this takeover talk. So I'll say Carlisle and Accrington.
Carlisle and Accrington from Joel. What about you, Ed?
See, I'm a bit more torn on this takeover talk because we're basically backing Vibes to be the reason that keeps Tranmere up now, because they can't actually do anything yet because we're past the window.
Yeah.
So they kind of got to stick with, they'll get a manager in, whoever that is. I admire whoever takes that job, by the way, because I don't think that's a particularly healthy looking squad, or indeed a confident looking squad. So I don't know. We're kind of backing Vibes and good spirit and increased spirits to save Tranmere there, even if they do have new owners by the end of the year. I'm definitely thinking Carlisle, unfortunately, for the double drop, and I think I'm going to have to stick with my feeling with Tranmere at the minute. I just believe Morecambe are very close to getting out of this now.
Yeah, I'm torn. I'm probably. This is very difficult. I don't know. I'm gonna go Carlisle and Morecambe on the proviso that the takeover goes through and Adkins leaves and something changes for Tranmere. But I could just easily said Tranmere and Accrington Stanley. So more questions than answers, I think, at this stage. Gents, thanks so much for joining us. Check out Ed on Twitter at Edward_W97. You can follow Joel Shooter at JoelShooter47 and Ben Jones for Ben DJ91 for Tranmere Rovers stuff. Thanks for watching. Get subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify, and we'll see you again next week.